insurance agents from around the world. Welcome to the Insurance Guys Podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless host and leader, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist for I Protect Insurance and Financial Services, based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Mobile, Alabama. Parade first team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
I'm getting over my cold.
There you go.
We're getting there.
Bradley, last night I get out of Moe's Barbecue. I order an Uber, jump in the Uber driver's vehicle. It was a Uber X. And he goes, "Hey, man, how you doing today?" Good, good. He goes, "What you doing in town?" I said, "Insurance, podcast, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "Really? I just got my adjuster's license, property adjuster's license last week." I said, "Congratulations, man." I said, he said, "Well, I got Spotify right here. You do an insurance podcast?"
Oh my
What's
gosh.
it called? He types it in, clicks play, and about the time we pull it, because it's only like a mile from Moe's to
It's
my
like
hotel.
a Ron Swanson. Every adjuster is a lying, miserable piece of crap.
And so by the time we were pulling into the front entrance to the Hilton Garden Inn, and all of a sudden I hear out of his speakers, "Insurance agents from around the world."
That's awesome.
Like, all right, man, have a good night. Enjoy that podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So, Bradley,
Maybe we could have him come on. We've never had an adjuster on the podcast.
we've had one.
Who?
We had John.
Oh, that's right. But we didn't talk about
I'm
insurance.
having
we
a
talked
senior
about
moment. What is his?
Green?
No, John.
Oh, I'm thinking of Nathan Green.
No.
John Bachman.
Yeah, John Bachman. We had him on one
He's not
time.
an adjuster anymore.
I was actually, when he said he just got his adjuster's license, I thought, man, we need to have an adjuster on it. And, one of my best friends is a property adjuster with Pilot. So that's who we need to get
probably
on.
where this guy works too.
Because, I asked him that. I said, well, which one of these firms you going to throw your license with Pilot? And he said, well, I don't know yet. He said, and I'd forgotten this because, my brother-in-law got his adjuster's license and never used it. Mm-hmm. But they have to do, I'm pretty sure it's like training wheels. Like the first, 6 months or so, you have to shadow a adjuster or some period of time. I don't know. Maybe it's a number of claims. And you do the claim and they look it over and blah, blah, blah before you can take the training wheels off. And
I don't know if you deal with this. I know you probably dealt with it. If we got a job application and on my online form it says, "Do you have property and casualty experience?" Yes. "Do you have a property and casualty license?" Yes. 9 times out of 10 of the people who mark yes to both of those questions, they're adjusters.
wow.
And I'm like, maybe the only job that would not be good at sales would be an underwriter next to an adjuster.
Yeah, I've never interviewed an adjuster. Are they? Is their personality just non-sales oriented, more technical because they?
I've interviewed some, and my problem, these guys that do the CAT adjusting for Pilot. Like I had a good friend that was a CPA, and when it wasn't tax time, or he wasn't a CPA, he was a tax prep guy. When it wasn't tax time, he would go do catastrophe adjusting for Pilot.
Sure.
He'd make like $40,000 in a month.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you have no life, and you're working 19 hours a
100%.
day in an area you're not from. And by the way, there's no power there because it was a catastrophe.
Correct. You're in a hotel.
I've interviewed some of these
60 miles
guys,
away to get power.
And they're like, "Hey, I want to, do sales. I want to be home." Like, okay, well, how's this going to work when a storm hits Orlando and they call you and you can make $40,000 in a lick? You know what I mean?
Or 100.
It's the same reason I don't hire bartenders anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for a bartender to go hop down to Moe's and make $400 in a night.
Right.
And they're like, and even if they're still able to come to work and be on time, they're not as sharp because they spend all night.
Correct.
And eventually they get pulled over to that direction.
And that
it's
is
kinda the same thing.
exactly what I told my brother-in-law. And I told this guy that yesterday. I said, well, you got a big problem. And he said, this is me talking to this Uber driver. I said, you got a big problem. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, do you have a wife? And he said, yeah. And I said, you got kids? And he goes, yeah, I got one. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told my damn brother-in-law that's never used his property adjuster license. I said, Wes, my brother-in-law, I said, you got 3 kids, 3 boys, all playing sports, all middle school, high school age. Your wife is a neonatal nurse. You have to pick these damn kids up every day or take them to school or see about the kids, and she's working 3rd shift at Huntsville Hospital. How exactly do you plan on going to Orlando to work a cat claim for 2 months? Mm-hmm. How exactly are you going to do that? And I told this guy, I said, I'm telling you the same thing, brother. If you can't for a month or 2 or 3 go to New Orleans or San Antonio or San Diego, California, and make that $100,000 in a lick for a month of basically camping out, you're not going to make the kind of money you want to make. And he goes, well, I got you beat on that. And I said, what's that? And he goes, my occupation before this, I was a truck driver.
Okay.
And I said, you're golden then, because your wife's used to you being gone.
It's so hard with kids, especially young kids. Yeah. I was telling Scott yesterday, Chris, I had, Auburn's playing their first round of the tournament in Lexington, and I had an insurance agent in Lexington was like, hey, if you come to the game, hit me up. And I was like, brother, I can't go to the gas station right now after 5 o'clock. He
got that ass,
and it's not that
for picking me up at the airport.
No, it's not that I can't do. It's that when one parent, when one parent leaves, it's so hard on the other one, and you don't want to. Actually, me and Scott Tyndall and Johnny Gwynn had tickets to go see Jordan Peterson tomorrow night.
Wow.
In Pensacola, and I texted him last night. I was like, dude, my nanny's out of town. Yeah, we're having potty training Luke. I can't leave her. And we never even had a conversation about it. But by the way, if you want Jordan Peterson tickets, I've got extra.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce my all-star guest today. This is the first time in recorded history, in the history of the United States of America, since Jesus walked on earth back in the 1300s, that we are going to have a podcast today that has never been done in recorded history. Since Abraham Lincoln was president of the United States, this has never happened. We have a insurance agency owner that has just purchased an agency, okay? And you're like, well, Scott, what's the big deal about that? Sitting in this podcast studio today, we also have what I call the other side of the aisle, which is the agency owner that has just sold his insurance agency to the other agency owner. So you have in one podcast both sides of the wedding party, the groom and the bride. You have the buyer and you have the seller in one room together. This has never happened in recorded history since Abraham Lincoln and Jesus walked on earth. So without further ado, I want to give him the introduction he's always deserved. He's originally from Tuscumbia, Alabama, and he currently resides in Fairhope, Alabama. He is married to the beautiful Dion, and he is a graduate of the University of South Alabama, also played football there with a degree in exercise science. That is the most football damn major in the history of football majors.
Majored in eligibility.
Yeah, 100% majored in
tennis,
eligibility.
Yeah, majored in tennis at the university. He also does radio broadcasting for the school, and I bet he does a fantastic job. You have the voice for it. You actually have
I got the face for it, too.
You have the face for TV because you are ruggedly handsome. Seriously. He plays a lot of pickup basketball, enjoys doing anything competitive. He was a producer for Farmers from 2017 to 2019 and the agency owner of LTN Insurance from 2019 to the present. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor today to introduce to you second-time guest on the IGP, Mr. Chris May. How are you, Chris?
I'm great, man. I do have one question. Who's the bride and who's the groom?
I would say Bradley's the bride because I'm just thinking honeymoon night. Who's giving, who's taking kind of thing. I don't know. I guess it's perspective on how you look at that. But, man, I am so excited to have you on this podcast today because, like I said, and I know I was kind of joking, but I'm kind of being serious in that I told Bradley a few weeks ago on a previous podcast, I said, I don't believe anybody has ever done a podcast where you have both the buyer and the seller in one room together discussing the acquisition of an agency from both sides of that aisle, because quite frankly, that's two different perspectives, right? Your perspective is as the seller of the agency, his perspective is as a buyer. And I wanted to have you come in today because I wanted to talk to both of you about the transition, how that went, looking back on it now from the lens of it's happened, so now we can look at it in the past instead of while it's going on. Tell me a little bit about it. I don't care which one of you starts. I'm just going to moderate and get in the middle of y'all if y'all start fist fighting, because I've seen some agency owners want to do that once they buy and sell.
Well, if I'm the bride, he would get arrested for hitting me.
Exactly. Domestic violence. So, Chris, talk a little bit about how this all came about, what you're doing today, but more importantly, talk a little bit about the process from the seller's perspective.
Well, I think this process started for us about 5.5 years ago at a Moe's barbecue, where Bradley was in the process of, he was actually offering me a job when I was considering, leaving Farmers.
Right.
And we just maintained a relationship from there, man.
Sure.
I think that relationship and both of us being focused on like, man, I'm not going to burn a bridge unless I have to,
Right.
I think that is probably what led us to be able to sit across the table right now and still have a really, really good relationship. Like I've said numerous times, I would have considered and still would consider Bradley, a close friend. But as far as insurance goes, as far as work goes, he was the closest person that I knew in the insurance industry, somebody
Right.
that helped me along the way, that we bounced ideas off of each other. And I think that is what allowed us to be able to get to this point. But I mean,
and I went
ahead.
into it like, I'll walk away from this if it hurts the friendship.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think, that, when you started, I think I said this on a previous episode, like, I kind of had it in the back of my head that like one day this would probably happen. I don't know which way, and it could have even been a straight merge, like an actual, I just think neither one of us thought it would be this soon,
Agreed. Yeah,
I was
had no
floored
plans
when
of
you
it.
called me.
Do what now?
I was floored when you called me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Hey, Chris, I've got to let's start with this. I've got to ask this question. You and I are in Orlando together at a conference. I guess it was 2 years ago now. And it kind of blew me over with a feather a few weeks ago when Bradley, because I didn't know anything about this going on. I think Bradley, was knee deep in all this and was just, not really wanting to tell a lot of people what was going on. But I
You
didn't
also
know.
don't want to spill your candy in the lobby and not go through,
Exactly that. Yeah, kind of like telling people you're pregnant too early kind of thing,
Correct.
But you, and y'all may have had NDAs as well. I don't know. I have no idea. But
did.
when I did find out that you were selling to Bradley, I was like blown away because you're one of the good guys to me in the industry. And I kind of felt selfishly like, man, we don't need to lose another good guy, and I don't think I've ever said that. I don't even think
Chris
I said
does
that
not
to you. I know Chris is so far out the door now.
My question, I don't think I've asked you this, is like, when you called me, because this is a tough industry, man. The last few years have been really tough. But when you called me, it all sort of made, because I would call you a couple times a week, and we would, if I found something exciting, hey, listen to this or whatever. And when you told me that like you were done, it kind of hit me. I was like, man, he has seemed a little unenthused like the last 6 months. What was the moment that you were like, yeah, I think this is or I guess two questions. I think there was a moment, probably a little bit closer to that phone call, where you were like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But was there a moment like 6 months before where you were like, man, this like my heart's not here anymore?
And that was kind of going to be my question. It was like, same question, but like, what caused you to wake up one morning after eating a bad piece of pizza and going, I don't want to do this shit no more?
And I think there's probably agency owners listening to this who are in that same boat.
I know there are.
Yeah, well, to answer that question, the moment that really hit me was at the lunch that I had a conversation with a guy before I called you, and I'll tell that story in just a second. But I would say, yes, about 6 months beforehand, I was getting to the point that I was like, man, like I don't know if this is for forever. And I was in the process of transitioning to do something else, to go to work for the company I work for now. And the original plan was
you were going to do that at one point on the side kind of thing?
So my original plan was to replace myself and have somebody operate the business, or the insurance agency, and then eventually, maybe 5-10 years down the road, I sell it.
Yeah.
But I was pretty dead set on, hey, that's the route that I'm going to go, and just few things just kept falling into place, and sought some counsel from some people, and was like, man, like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to steward both of these things really well.
Right.
Put my energy into both of them well, and lead the people that are on my team. Like, I just feel like I'm going to fail at that. And I went to lunch with a guy that's become, a mentor to me and just a really good friend. He was one of my clients as well, and our relationship kind of started off of that and then just deepened. And I was just asking his opinion on it, and I was like, man, like, I have to be realistic here. Like, if we get hit, when we get hit with another hurricane, I may have to step back into the agency. What if one of my team members leaves? How am I going to manage all this? And he told me a quote, something to the gist of, man, at the end of the day, the house always wins. If you play the game of business long enough, the house is always going to win. The guy that ultimately wins is the one that's able to take cash off the table and de-risk himself. And I was like, oh, man, that's a really good quote. So I called Bradley like 2 hours after that lunch and was like, hey, man, I'm serious. Because we briefly talked about, like, I may have just jokingly kind of called when I bought my 2 business partners out. That's right. We did have a conversation about that, and I was just like, man, what would this look like if I just sold to you at this point instead of buying them out? And he was like, oh man, we can talk about it if you get to that point. And I never really thought more about it. But anyways, I called him afterwards and was like, hey man, what are your thoughts about this? He's like, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, well, do you have a number in mind? And I told him the number. He called me back the next day with that number, with that offer. My first thought was, dang, I should ask for more money. But I felt like it was fair, like for both of us. I think you would agree with this.
It was like right at the top of like the range of what I could pay for that. You know what I mean? And I actually said on the podcast yesterday, we were talking about it. Like, if you hadn't have been a friend, the offer probably would have been 20% less. But it was like, look, he's a friend. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm just going to give like best and final in the beginning. And then if he don't want to do it, okay, like, let me help you find somebody else. You know what I mean?
I feel like both of us walked away from the table saying, I feel like I could have got an inkling better deal, which is the best negotiation you can have. When there's no absolute clear winner, that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, but I guess I need to deep dive into this further, okay, because I'm not saying the right thing. So I'm on this podcast every week, and I know the listeners that are listening right now have heard me bitch and moan and complain, and I've had a lot of shit go bad in my agency over the past 3 years. But I love this industry, and I love insurance. I mean, I don't have any hobbies. Like, I can sit here, I'll read Insurance Journal every week. I love the insurance industry. And so the thought of me not being in the industry, at least today, is just blows my mind that somebody would wake up the next morning or one morning and be like, I don't want to do this shit no more. Like, what caused you to get there? To get to that point to where you're like, I just don't want to do this shit no more. I want to go do something else.
Yeah, it's a great question, man.
You know what I'm saying?
I do, and in saying this, I don't want this to scare someone away from the insurance industry, because
just be honest.
It's a phenomenal industry. It's a great business model, man. It really is.
Just throw it out there. You won't hurt nobody's feelings.
The thing that got to me eventually was, at the end of the day, I sell a product that I don't control the price, and I don't fulfill it. If somebody files a claim, I have no input on what happens.
Sure.
Yes, I could have said you should have had sewer and water backup. But at the end of the day, the adjuster, like you guys are talking about, they're the ones that fulfill the promise that I'm making. Like, I've heard you say time and time again, hey, Scott, I had a claim. I didn't buy insurance from Travelers. I bought it from you. Yep. And I just got so tired of hearing over and over again that I was already, what I'm moving towards now is I'm much more passionate about it.
Sure.
And that just continued. That snowball just got bigger and bigger. And it was like, man, like, I can't get over that.
Yeah,
anymore.
that makes perfect sense.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing now, and it also might like benefit that if there's people listening that are interested.
Yeah, so I now work for a company called C12, which is a company that...
Isn't that a drink? C12? Isn't there a
There
C12?
used to be it's C4.
C4, that's what it was.
That's
Never
a
mind. I'm sorry.
pre-workout that was
Made your head feel like you had fire
it
ants
was
on
like
your head.
The Four Loco of
By
pre-workout.
the
Yeah.
way, on
I
that
remember I
note,
took it, and it would make when I took it, it would make my head feel like I had fire ants on my head.
That's beta alanine. It makes your skin tingle. I
probably
don't like
not.
it.
That's
I
that exercise science degree coming into
can't
play.
take-
by the way, on that
Pre-workout.
note, while you guys are listening to this, Google CEO of Bang Energy Drinks.
Uh-oh. What did he do?
He looks exactly like what you think the CEO.
He
of
looks like a Bang energy drink.
Yeah. Hang on.
That's funny.
Let me just Google him because I know the listeners are.
Does
too.
does he look like he gets up in the morning, brushes his teeth, and snorts an 8-ball of Coke every morning?
Yes.
He drinks 2 of those things, and his hair starts standing on end. So
This is him right here.
So tell us a little bit about. Wow, that guy! I want to buy something from that guy. So C12, because our listeners and really myself, I don't really know what that is exactly. I think the way Bradley described it to me, because of course I naturally ask him, well, what's what industry? What is he going to do? And he said it was kind of a FCA type. Christian fellowship, Christian athletes type. Am I right or is that wrong?
I would say that's wrong.
Okay.
I would say that there's some accuracy to the Christian aspect of it for sure, but I would say that that's probably the only part of that we're similar to them. So C12 is a peer group. You guys are familiar with a peer group. We've been to Paradiso's Mastermind, stuff like that. Yeah. So think of that, but a much smaller scale. It's groups of 12 business owners that are seeking to grow their business in a way that honors the Lord, and they're seeking to grow. They're seeking to not use the Christian banner as an excuse for mediocrity. Like they want to grow, they want to build their businesses.
Yeah,
they just want to do it in a way that honors God and does it from a biblical principles.
Is 12 from the 12 disciples?
There's nothing in our training that mentions that. I'm sure that there is something, that
you said
that
the
is
number
connected to that.
You said the number 12 as if that's a firm number. Like each group, you need to fulfill the group's mission. It needs to be 12 businesses for each. The goal is it a chapter? Is that
it's a group? So it's a forum is the word that we use for it. So the goal is to have 12. Some groups, you could have 11 or you could have 14. But the reason for 12 is, man, you get to the Paradiso Mastermind's great. I really enjoyed going to it.
I just booked my hotel for it this year. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if there's a group full of 40 people, there's a lot of people whose voices aren't going to be heard just naturally based off of time. There's going to be somebody that talks and you've only got so much time in the day. Well, if you've got a group of 12 guys or gals that are sitting in a room together, most likely they're all going to have opportunity to talk if you're in a meeting from 9 to 4. So the goal of the group is, there's an intimate aspect of it. There's also for my role. So my role is called a chair. My job is to facilitate those meetings, and my job is to meet with those members on a one-on-one basis per month.
Gotcha.
The reality is, if there's
individually or as a group?
Individually.
Okay.
If there's 25 of those people in each of those groups, well, now we're at 50 to 75 people. I don't have the time.
Watered down.
It gets watered down, and I don't have the time to really be engaged in that person's life either. So there's an aspect of it that it's limited on purpose. One, because you're typically very rarely going to see like multiple people in the same industry in a C12 group. It's going to be a plurality of people. Like there's people in all different industries.
So it sounds to me, based on what you just said, that this is a smaller, more Christian-oriented and focused BNI type environment.
I would eliminate the B&I part of it. Like,
and I only say B&I because that's
there's structure to
business
it.
Group, and
it's not. You don't have the referral aspect.
There's no.
No.
We all sign a non-solicitation to come in the group, and you sign an NDA to be in the group too, because you're going to hear. We do a core business presentation thing that you're going to share your P&L, you're going to share your balance sheet. We're going to do an interview with your spouse to hear like, hey man, how's that going?
Can I ask a question,
please?
So, how did you get involved with this originally? Because I'm still trying to go back to the day when you were like,
Scott's thinking about starting one.
This damn insurance shit sucks. I'm doing something else. Did you get involved as a member of C12 originally, and then through that, your passion for it grew and grew to the point where you're like, man, I'd really like to be involved in this in more of a a permanent way, instead of just showing up to the meetings or the chapter. What did you say? Not chapter.
A forum chapter.
Forums.
I mean, they all mean
tomato,
the same
tomato.
thing. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I would agree with that. That's generally kind of how it worked. I've been a member for 3 years, and I've known even when I started the insurance agency that insurance wasn't for me forever. That it was, hey man, this may be a 10, this may be a 15, this may be a 20-year thing, but this is my first business. I knew that getting into it. I knew that when I started it. I knew that when I bought my business partners out. Just knew that at some point that it was going to run its course. And about this time last year, the guy that is, so C12 was ran off a franchise model, and the guy that has the franchise for Montgomery South is the guy that heads up our group. And he mentioned that he was looking for somebody to come on board with him. And my wife is extremely risk averse, from, obviously from the transaction with me and Bradley, I was like, hey, I want to take some of this money and invest it. And my wife's first thought is, well, we could lose that.
Right.
I'm like, okay, but obviously you can. She's just very risk averse.
You could do like I did last week and buy Tesla stock at its absolute peak.
Yeah, there you go.
You can do that.
But she and I, she's someone that I always bounce anything off of because obviously she's my wife, she's my partner in life, all that fun stuff. So I come home and tell her, hey, I may have some interest in this. What do you think? She's like, you should do it. I don't care how much money you make. Like, you should do that. And I was like, whoa, like slow down a little bit. So I slow burned the interview process for about 6 months. And that's when that snowball started really rolling.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Was your wife ever, and if you want us to edit this out, we can, was your wife ever really supportive of you being in the insurance industry, or was she just didn't really carry
If she
it
was
away?
risk averse, she was probably like really worried when you started.
Well, for one,
I mean,
you don't have to edit
again.
this
if
out
you want
because
that
she would
edited
say
out,
this.
we'll
No,
edit it
my,
out.
my wife doesn't have a clue about insurance.
Okay.
So she really doesn't. Like, she'll listen.
She didn't carry the way.
She'll humor me on listening to business stuff, but she really doesn't care. Like, to her, at the end of the day, she's like, hey, if you're happy, if this works, if you can have some type of balance in your life, that you're not traveling, 6 days out of the week or something like that, she doesn't really care. My wife is super supportive, and I really struggled with trying to find a career to get settled in when we first got out of college. Like, to tell you where we started, my wife was teaching at a private school, and I was working at the cafe that our church has, and we made combined $26,000 a year.
Yep.
And I came home one day and told her, like, hey, I'm kind of hungry. What do you want to eat for dinner? And she's like, you checked our bank account. And this is like a Friday night. We're like 3 weeks into marriage, and she's like, have you checked the bank account? I said, no, I haven't looked at it. I was like, I just want Chick-fil-A. She's like, well, you should look at it. I was like, there's $31 in our bank account. And I was like, we're good. Let's go to Chick-fil-A.
Yeah,
what's wrong
Chick-fil-A
with you?
all day long.
And she was like, what did I sign up for?
Right.
So her just seeing me actually find something, be consistent with it was exciting for her.
Has there been a moment of, because I was actually thinking about this, because, I'm sure she was really scared when you started the business, and it's scary starting a business.
Mm-hmm.
After you sold, and I'm not asking this question because I was on the other end of the transaction. I would ask this if you had sold to, Marsh. I would be asking, was there a moment where it was like, because I can imagine, like, was there a moment where it was like, wow, I'm proud of you. What, like, you did, like, I'm glad you did this. You know what I mean?
Yes, there was. She was on the opposite side of the fence from me of when I came home was like, I think we should sell this. She's like, I think that's a terrible idea. I think you should hold on to it, which is ironic because the reason that I was like, I need to get out of this is because I need to de-risk myself. Where she saw it from the other side is like, oh my gosh, you're not going to have an income. I'm like, well, yeah, we're not going to have an income, but we're going to make some money off this transaction. I think we'll be okay for at least a year. Yeah, there was, man. I mean, my wife has been so supportive throughout the whole process.
That's
like
awesome.
She's told me that numerous times with starting the agency, during, the process of the agency, when I bought my partners out, because that was really stressful for us. Like, just the conversations that were had, and you guys know my story, and that there wasn't anything that got really hairy there, but it was more of just like, man, we knew them. Our kids go to school
You don't know what's
together.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Correct,
The unknown
correct.
is,
The
Can I ask
unknown's
a
really
question?
scary.
Well, like, I think you should be very proud that you started something, created it from scratch, and sold it for a lot of money like that. You should be extremely proud.
I appreciate that. I mean, it was a
and-
fun process. But
And one thing to add to what
It feels like
Bradley's-
death along the way. You feel like you're going to die at any
really
moment.
does.
Yeah.
it really
But
does.
one thing I want to say, in addition to what Bradley said, and I completely agree, you should be very proud. But as I was thinking about you and being one of the good guys and losing
Scott's
you
here
in
to
this
try to
industry,
talk you into reversing the transaction.
and like I held a funeral and had flowers. It was the whole thing.
I got to get out of this non-compete thing, before.
Yeah, right. Well, you just hit the nail on the head. I started thinking about you, and I thought, the more I think about Chris and him getting out of the industry and us losing one of the good guys, the more I thought, Chris has been through a lot since he's been in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to seem jaded or whatever, but you kind of started with one foot in the grave, because Bradley and I have had this conversation on the podcast about starting an agency with business partners. Well, we
talked about that on your episode.
Yeah, we did. Have you ever seen that work?
No.
No, I haven't either.
Now, it's a real,
So you're
really
kind of
small,
one foot in the grave
well,
to start.
It depends on what your definition of work is. I also have a really small sample size, but I could rattle off probably 6 people I know that have done that.
and I'll call you a year
all
later
of
and they're like,
them-
that was a mistake.
All of them
Yeah.
have ended with the main guy buying the partners out
Sure.
and then selling the agency a couple years
Yeah,
later.
that's right.
Not
And
to
then,
throw you in a bucket.
Oh no,
but
that's
and then you had the best friend that walked in on a
Because when
random
you-
Tuesday at 4 and was like, hey, I got great news. I want to go do this by myself.
yeah, you've
the
had that
funny
happen
part about
twice.
that. I'm pretty sure it was on Tuesday at like 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny.
But the problem is when you take investors want a substantial return
And rightfully so. That's what
in
they're
a
getting into it
in
for.
a short-ish amount of time.
Correct.
And you don't get both of those things with insurance unless it's a 10-year,
Right.
15-year window.
That's right.
Like I'm involved with a company as an advisor right now, and the CEO of that company met with a potential an angel investor last week, and he told the guy, he's like, "Look, I need a 50x, 100x return.
Yeah.
Like that's what he wants
In
we're
3
like-
years.
We're like, we can't give you that. Like,
Well, and you guys know this. I mean, man, the margins in insurance are so small, and the amount of effort and manpower
Right.
that it takes to actually generate a real amount of profit,
Right.
it takes a long time in insurance. I mean, those
It
first
does.
3 years are like, man, the
Break
first
even.
2 years is like rice and beans, beans and rice. Like we're
Sure.
just trying to make it. And year 3, it's like, oh, these renewals, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
dude, I remember. I don't think I've told this story. So when we started Portal, I basically had the perfect amount of money to make it 13 months. Like, and so that renewals kick in or whatever. And I remember I spoke to the Big Eye of Ohio. It's the only time I've been spoken to that group, and that was like the 12th month, and we was like. The
tight.
bank account was really light, and I was like, I
Yeah.
kind of felt a little bit like a fraud, a little bit, but I mean, the plan worked. Like we started hitting the renewals and stuff,
And by the
But
way,
it's-
for our listeners that are listening to this, I want them to, if you don't mind, Bradley, and if you don't want to do this, that's fine. But I cannot tell you the number of producers that have called me over the past 5 years or emailed or texted me, and they all have that first question is, how much money
Yeah.
do I need in my bank account to start an agency? Now, I've heard people say as little as 10,000. I've heard people say 100,000. What to you? What was that perfect
I
amount to
started
kind of
with-
get you to that 12-month?
I started
mark?
with way too little. Way too little. I mean, I think now, man, to do it right,
Yeah.
and it depends on where you are,
Sure,
and it depends
sure.
on the structure of the agency. Are you one man show? Or you?
Are you
know,
wanting to
That's
start
what I
out
was
like
gonna say.
State Farm with 3 or 4
correct,
producers,
like we
and-
did?
Yeah.
I think you need $100,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Like-
that's the number
You
that
know,
came into my head.
but you
Unless
need
you're
to-
just going to
Probably
sit there
without
by
you taking a
yourself.
paycheck too.
Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
including
Yeah,
you getting
yeah.
paid.
100%.
That's just to
Yeah, and you
pay
also need to have a
somebody
spouse that has a really good job that can float the bills, like I did for a year and a half.
Well,
But
to
but
your-
it's you have to, and you have to really know your numbers, man. You can't go out and buy all the fancy smancy customer experience. Like I tell people all the time, like we started Portal, we had an email signature program, a phone system, and AMS. That was it.
Yeah, and your AMS was now search, and I think the first
They
year,
gave it to me
you
for
paid
free.
like $180
They
a month
gave it to me
for
for
that.
free for the first year.
Yeah, right.
And that's you really have to know your expenses, and you really have to know how to sell, because if you know how to sell, that number gets smaller that you need.
Right.
So like for us, our bills, it cost us roughly $400 a day to run the office when we opened. So every day that we wrote $4,000 in premium, I was like, okay,
Today was a good day.
We paid the bills today, and then what you do, however many months you start with, every month that you wrote enough new business to pay the bills buys you another month.
Right.
And it keeps tracking out.
Sure.
And even now still, like, I don't really get excited. Like, we've been having some really good days here lately, $20,000 or $30,000 new business days.
Sure.
I don't really get excited now until it's like above 50.
Right.
But when I'm watching like our production for the day and we hit 4,000, I still get a little bit of like,
Yeah, juice.
like that was still the number. You know what I mean?
4,000 revenue?
Premium.
Okay.
But that's still like the, the thing. You know what I mean?
Now that I sit here thinking about it, and I'm speaking to our audience now instead of the two of you, I do remember when I started the agency program with Nationwide Insurance, and I'll have to say, as a captive carrier that's been around for however long, I think they pretty much had this dialed in. But before you could sign and come on in the program that I was in, they had a mandatory requirement that you had to show proof in your bank account of $70,000. Now that was you. That was you coming in by yourself, starting pretty much what I would call a scratch agency.
I interviewed with Allstate in 2013 or 2012, and it was 75.
That number, by yourself.
Yeah.
In a small, tiny office with zero premium, I think that number would be about right.
Yeah.
If you're by yourself. Now, again, if you wanted to start the way Bradley did it, which is the right way to do it, with at least maybe one service person and maybe a salesperson, then I think that number probably jumps to 100,000.
I think there's a lot of producers out there that open an agency because they want to make money.
Sure.
And they are in a situation in their town or city where there's not an agency owner that can help them facilitate what they want to do. So the only logical choice is to open an agency. And I think if you're a producer and your goal is to make money in a less than 10-year window, you are better off going to work somewhere that'll let you sell.
100%.
The flip side of that is if you can't breathe unless you are calling the shots and it's your agency, which was the case with you and I, then that's when you go do that, regardless of all the other stuff. And that was the case with me. Even though I didn't start with a ton of money, it was like, even if this fails, like I'm so miserable where I'm working now. Like I can't breathe unless I do this.
Correct. Yeah.
Like I remember like being in tears at my kitchen table talking to Laurel, and I was like, I just have to do this. And it might gloriously fail, but by the way, we're going to write business, and worst case scenario, we can sell it if, you know what I mean?
I think the irony of those first few years is, if you guys think back to it, year one was honestly the most fun that I had in insurance. Because all you do is write insurance, you're meeting people, you're shaking hands. And the irony of it is year three, when you're like, oh, wow, these renewals are real, that's when it actually gets tough. Because now you've got these renewals coming in, you've hired service people, you have to have processes, you have to have all this in place. It's not just, oh, we can write premium and it solves the problem. That actually creates more problems once you get to year three.
I talked to an agency owner 2 weeks ago who was a couple years in business, $1 million in premium, so decently small. But has done well in California, which, if you can imagine, a harder place to start a scratch agency now. And I was like, look, let me tell. And he was like, I know, like I don't have it as good as you, or he said something like that. And I was like, look, man, I very fondly miss where you are right now.
Yep.
I'm not telling you I would trade with you, but I do miss it and look back fondly on those days.
That's right.
Because now, the only thing I deal with are problems.
That's it.
And the problems I deal with are bad problems.
Yeah.
Like bad problems. And it's like, back then it was just like, you're writing business, so you made money, and all that. Like right now, Scott and I are basically, when Scott and I are podcasting, I'm in a bubble for 2 days in here.
Yep.
Like I might as well not be at the office. Imagine that you are in your master bathroom, right? Or your bedroom, and your 3-year-old comes in and somehow puts a chair in front of the door that you can't get out of the room, and the house catches on fire and there's nothing you can do. That's exactly how I feel when we're podcasting. Like, I know there's fires beyond fires going on out there in that room, and my email is a freaking bloody mess right now. But there's nothing I can do about it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the bigger you get, the problems get bigger. The catch is, you know, when your problems get bigger and really bad, that's when you start making money.
Right.
So it's like a good trade-off, you know?
I've got this sticky note that I left on one of these monitors that at some point that
I've never seen an agency have so many external monitors.
I don't know why I had them, to be honest. I really don't. But anyways,
So did you do an asset part? Did you buy all of his assets too?
We bought the assets, and he generously gave me the furniture.
Gotcha.
I mean, I had no
That
need
table
for
out
it.
there is super nice.
Yeah, I had no need for it. So my office is my home.
I wish
now,
I'd have
but-
got that couch, though.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I blew past it to get into this conversation, but I wanted to go back to it because I think it's so important. Since you sold, and how long has it been? Like a month?
No,
We're
it's
like
been
3 weeks.
3 weeks is all okay.
3 weeks from today.
And it's going very well.
Yeah,
I will just say to you and all
you
the
ran a good
listeners,
shop.
like,
That's testament to you that you ran a good
and
shop.
Cole's been a huge help.
yeah,
Cole's a good
of course
dude,
he
man.
has. Of course he has. He's great.
I told Bradley yesterday, I said, let me tell you about Cole. I was out there listening to him some and watching him and talking to him a little bit. He's easy to like. He's real laid back, so he's not ever going to put pressure on somebody to buy anything. But he's the kind of guy that people are going to genuinely like, and he's
He's
gonna
pretty
be
soft-spoken, too.
Soft-spoken, going to be easy to do business with, right? But my question was this for you, Chris, specifically, because I know Bradley and I, sans me having 2 little mean-ass kids at home, we deal with the same stuff every day, and he's fortunate to have a wife that's in the industry, so to some degree, she understands what we go through. But has your wife noticed a difference in you from the standpoint of being less stressed, more loving, more, hey, you know, maybe it's we can go to lunch today. You want to go to lunch today, or
I know she has because I have.
Yeah.
oh
You
really?
seem way more chill.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel it for sure.
Okay,
I
like the
don't know
weight's
if-
been lifted off your shoulders.
Absolutely. Mainly just because the stress of those transactions like that. And I felt it way more when the producer bought his book and when I bought my partners out than I did with this. And I think it's because I'd gone through both of those.
Yeah.
But there's just this stress of like, man, you feel this tension of, is the next phone call, is this deal going to fall apart? And you know it's not, but
Oh, you're
there's
talking
still
about y'all's deal.
every time
okay.
that we have a phone call, it's like I don't know what's on the other end of this phone call. This could be a really good call. This could be, hey, we're having a funny laugh about a story that we're talking about, or it could be, hey, XYZ just fell apart. There it
I
went,
thought you were
know?
going to say the lack of having the phone call to the office where Miss Jones's house just burned down, and for some reason her policy can't, expired 2 days ago.
2 days
that-
after we closed, there was storms in Fairhope,
Yeah,
and I
there
texted him. I was like, "Watch a freaking EF5 tornado rip through downtown
Largest
Fairhope."
tornado in American history just hit
But
Fairhope.
talk a little bit about the transaction and how that went, real quick, and we gotta run out from your end, and that sort of thing.
Did it help to have Carrie with both of y'all?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like
Would it
I
have-
would not
would it
be
have
sitting
happened?
here. It would not have happened without Carrie.
Why?
Like, because the thing that we talked about that the thing that you had here a couple weeks back, that for me, that I was like, man, like you've got to look forward and plan backwards. Like, where do you want to be in 10 years? If you don't want to sell now, great. Like, obviously don't prepare for it. But I engaged with Carrie because as I was buying my partners out, I needed some help on like, how am I going to manage this and how am I going to manage it afterwards? And without having somebody that's actually looking at your books and saying, how much money are you spending on XYZ? Are you actually sticking to this budget? I would have not gotten the multiple that I gotten revenue wise without Carrie 100%.
Right.
But I also would have been a lot more stressed because I wouldn't have known what I didn't know about like, what does EBITDA even look like?
Right.
How does that affect this? How does, the actual cash flow that we have, how does that impact this transaction? Like she's
Well, it's
a godsend.
it makes it easy on me too because I totally trust the numbers. Not that I wouldn't trust you, but
having her eyes on
now
it
where it made it more difficult on me was when I do these transactions. Carrie is the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I call I'll call
guy?
the seller and be like, "We have to do this thing. My CFO said that, even though it's me that wanted to do it." I can't do that though because my CFO is also his CFO.
Right.
I can't say,
that's what I'm saying.
And she had to be like very neutral,
She
during.
did such a good job.
Yeah, and I think kind of the way that she handled it from my perspective was like she was very neutral during the negotiation. Then after the sale happened, it was almost like she was working for me because it's like we've got the number down. Let's just make sure everything's in order, But yeah, she's invaluable. And like one of the things she did for us after the transaction, so I get like really emotional with like the ebbs and the flows of the P&L. And if we have a not so great P&L month, I get in a pissy mood and I start trying to figure out what went wrong, and a lot of times it may not be that there's stuff that went wrong. It's just that wasn't a huge revenue month. So our revenue kind of goes on a bell curve.
Sure.
January, February, March are low. April, May, June, July are high, et cetera. She did a cash flow analysis for me. So she basically broke my book down and was like, this is what your revenue is going to be in this month, et cetera, so that we could plan for those down months. So it's just like stuff like that. And I was telling the group last week at the workshop, Chris spoke at the workshop, that even if you are not planning to sell, you need to structure your agency in a way that
you could.
It just gives you options.
Because it gives you options because you never know. I mean, you could have something happen.
Cancer.
Something happen personally.
Or if you want to buy somebody, you need to be acting as if you're getting ready to sell too because you have the numbers.
I can't tell you the number of agency owners I've spoke with that want to sell their agency. They want a high multiple, and I ask for P&L and balance sheet, which everybody should have, and they go, I don't have any of that shit.
Yeah.
I literally have people say that to me, like, how are you
like
getting
your blood pressure?
Explain to me how you're going to get.
We can't read that. How do we know you're alive?
Explain to me how you're going to get 4 times revenue, Randy, if you don't have an updated P&L. Like you don't want to have to rush to throw all that together, because if you rush to throw all that together, guess what? You're not going to get as much.
But some guy named Randy's checking his messages to see if he ever texts you right now.
To your point of what the example you just gave about the blood pressure, most agency owners' response to that would be, well, I'm alive because I know I'm alive. I don't need to know my blood pressure, i.e. I know there's some money in the bank, so I don't need a P&L and a balance sheet, right? And my next question, and one of my last questions, because I know we've got to go eat Thai here in a minute, for you and these other agents that are listening to this, because I always try to look at this from the lens of what they want to know about, what were just your top 5 things that Bradley and Carrie ask you for? I know carrier reports to include loss runs. What are some of the other checklist things that they're like, all right, Chris, if we're going to do this, here's what I need. What were the top 5 things you had to pull together to do that?
To me, the first thing would definitely be P&L.
Yeah.
Even more, obviously, balance sheet's important, but you need to see a P&L because you need to see what's coming in and you need to see what's going out, and that needs to be relatively accurate.
And
not the
just
detail. I didn't even know
P&L.
about that until you told me that. It shows you from a month to month. This is how, so you can see that bell curve
in the categories.
Yes,
but not just a detailed P&L. It's probably 3 years of like P&L.
I usually ask for people for a year-to-date P&L and a trailing 12.
Yeah,
I really don't ask for 3 years until we get closer. And the only thing I'm looking at on a 3-year is, okay, did we have a substantial revenue decrease?
Right.
Now, I didn't even ask him for it because I know he sold that book, so the data on there is not going to be accurate. It's not going to tell the story. But I like the year-to-date and the trailing 12 because I can get a general idea of like where things are today.
Producer comp's another big one too. Like you've got to have that dialed in. I did not have that dialed in before I hired Carrie, and afterwards she changed that and restructured it for me. Man, to me,
dialed in as in
I was paying way too much.
Okay.
My structure was broken.
Yeah, but once you give somebody something, you can't hardly take it back without them quitting.
Well, luckily they all left, so it actually worked in my favor. They either left or started their own agency.
Right,
So I was trying to hire people that were like me, which is one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give anybody in hiring. Is like, man, like I'm bad about if I like you, I'm going to hire you, and that's not the greatest hiring process.
My 3 goals through this transaction in closing. My number 1 goal was, regardless of what happened, to keep a friend. My number 2 goal was to make sure it closed. And my number 3 goal is to convince him to get back in insurance and come be at Portal.
Was there a chance of that ever happening for you, Chris?
I mean, I'll keep my license just to have the license.
He's still referring stuff over
I'll
here,
refer business, but getting back in insurance, like, man,
hey, look, let me
gonna
just go ahead and
happen.
give you the pitch right now. You want to come back on? We'll open the office back up in Fairhope. You have your own little corner. You're there, you know. But I know it's not
do you
going to
live in the
happen.
Fruit and Nut District over
I
there?
don't. We actually just moved to Daphne.
Okay.
So we lived in Fairhope, and we found a house that was just kind of perfect. We had to close on it quickly because of the transaction, and it's like, yeah, could buy the house, necessarily in cash if we wanted to, but it's like, I
Which,
don't
by
really
the
wanna
way,
do
put a
that.
lot of pressure on me because I was like, crap, they just bought a house. And if something happens and I want to pull out of this transaction, I'm going to feel like a dick.
Hey, do you want to know something crazy? Is back when I was in construction, I built a subdivision in Daphne,
Really?
and I want to say it was water. I don't know. I can't remember.
Waters?
Maybe the Waters. Yeah, I don't remember. It was in
That
some
may actually be
pasture land that we bought, like 20, 30 acres, and built a bunch of. They're kind of those houses similar to. I mean, they're standalone, but the ones across the street now from Bradley.
I know exactly. It's off Pollard Road, probably.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
There's a bunch of townhomes that look just like that off Pollard Road.
I spent a year out there building that all the way from curb and gutter, and then we built the model home, and then we started, and that was not far. That was 2004, 5, 6 was okay, and then the mortgage crisis hit in that 7, 8 time frame, and that's about
Then
the
you
time
said
I got
Nationwide is on your side. Huh?
Nationwide is up. But hey, I appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
So have you started full time with C12?
I have. So I'm up and running. The question that you asked earlier, is my wife am I able to have lunch with her? Right now, no, because I'm starting a new business. Like I'm starting from ground up. I've got to build that. So I'm out and back on the grind now. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, man. I mean, it was, the transaction went as smooth as it could go. And
so last question, and then I'm going to shut this thing down. I know you were supposed to stay on for in the capacity of just kind of letting if I need something, I'll call you kind of thing. Is that kind of work the way you thought it would and the way you thought
Other
it would?
than the fact that I'm bugging the absolute crap out of him with phone calls. I think
I see it the other way.
What phone calls are you having to make? I mean, the deal's
just
done.
like, hey, I need this.
What's your Instagram password?
Yeah,
What's the LTN
Because there's a
Instagram
million
password?
things in these transactions you know how systematized Kenneth is. We got checklists for everything. There's still stuff that you don't think about until you get in.
Are
You're
you
like,
still
I need
asking
this
him
thing.
to talk to clients that maybe they're
a little bit?
We've got a
for-
couple that we'll connect with. Just some of our bigger commercial accounts. Like we want to make sure that those that transition
And
goes
did you
well,
send a
but
letter out to all of their people saying,
Absolutely
"Hey, this is
not.
what happened"?
I feel like that's like
Kiss of death.
That's asking. That's just asking people to leave you.
You're literally kicking an ant bed.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that. Have the conversation when it comes up for renewal. There's no need for that.
Okay.
But honestly, I expected them to need me more than they have. So you saying that you feel like I haven't felt that in the slightest.
Well, hey, podcast listeners, hope you guys have enjoyed having the very first podcast in the world of insurance buyer and seller in the same room together after a transaction took place, listening to this, kind of how it went. I think they both made a good decision. I'm proud of both of you. Bradley, I'm proud of you for all you've accomplished, and
Thank you, sir.
super jealous of you. And I mean, I barely knew how to spell insurance when I was 36, 37 years old. And Chris, I'm proud of you
I have the gray hairs to prove it.
I'm proud of Chris for recognizing and looking himself in the mirror, and instead of being like so many people that just kick the can down the road until they're 70 years old and ready to retire from the whatever job and get their watch, understanding that, hey, if I'm truly going to be happy, and this will only get one shot at this, it's not like we get 3 tries. I need to go do something that's going to make me happy and make my wife happy and give me the type of life that I want to live. And I'm super proud of you for that. But I will say I'm a little saddened by losing one of the good guys in our industry.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure I'll be around a little bit, but I'm not talking to Ethel about her $2 rate increase anymore.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And I
We're
don't have to.
handling
I don't
those
have to
calls.
call you to say I'm going through the same thing you're going through right now.
Yeah, that's true. That I forgot about that. Actually, that's funny. Yeah.
Guys, you're listening to the Insurance Guys podcast, and as I end every episode, rewards come from action, not discussion. Action, not discussion. Get your ass out from behind that desk today. I'm gonna tell you something before I let you go. If you're one of those agents that's like Chris, that has another passion outside of insurance, this is my real passion, but I'm just doing this to kick the can down the road till I can do that thing that I'm really passionate about, I'm going to say my advice to you is you need to look yourself in the mirror and develop a plan pretty quickly. Doesn't have to be tomorrow, but maybe in the next 6 months to a year of figuring out a way to go do that thing. Because, guys, you may get killed on the interstate tomorrow afternoon. Who knows? But don't do something for the rest of your life just because of the money or just because of how it, whatever, the prestige or the whatever it is. Go figure out what you're passionate about and do what Chris May has done and go do that damn thing and do it well. So go make money for your family, for your wife, for your kids' college fund, for your parents and your in-laws that are struggling out there today. Go make money for them. Write good business for the agencies that you represent and write good business for the carriers that you represent. Bradley Flowers, I love you.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Chris.
Chris, we love you too, brother.
Right back at you, brother.
Guys, you're listening to the Insurance Guys podcast, and we love each one of you. Thank you so much for being a part of our family. We'll see you back here real soon. Take care.